and welcome to another Sync Executive Insight. I am Jason Senamore, the Chief Product Officer here at Sync, and I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Morten Sorensen, Vice President in the Project Management Office for Peraton. Morten, thank you very much for joining me.
You're welcome.
Morten is going to be joining us at our Northeast IT and Security Leaders Forum in Washington, DC. And at the forum itself, he's going to be leading a discussion around connecting strategy to outcomes and the end-to-end strategy execution framework that organizations should be looking at. Very interesting topic, very excited about having Morten come along to the event and give this presentation. Just to kick things off, can you just start by giving us a bit of an overview of why this is important in the first place and why people are having challenges in this space?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Recent research shows that only 1 in 10 organizations are able to implement all their strategic initiatives. So when you think about that, and when you also know that recent research shows that 70% of transformational initiatives fail to achieve all of their goals, that's staggering. We have all the odds against us, it seems. So organizations would serve themselves well by understanding the full end-to-end life cycle of strategy execution. There is a tendency, which is very common, for folks in organizations to focus on the shiny objects. They're focusing perhaps on a product, they're focusing perhaps on a technology-driven outcome, but in many cases we forget that the execution strategy framework includes many components. And when you look at it, and we'll talk about the 5 pieces, but when you look at it, this life cycle is really only as strong as the weakest link. So if there's any particular area that an organization is perhaps weak in, or perhaps has as a gap altogether, they're not going to get the outcomes that they're looking for. And what we're talking about is the entire life cycle from strategic planning and goal setting down to looking at the obstacles that we have when we set goals. There are many aspects of goal setting that I think are overlooked. There are leadership questions that we should ask ourselves to really make sure that our initiatives are aligned to strategy. And I think there are straightforward ways that we can do that. There are straightforward ways in which organizations can demonstrate the alignment such that everybody is on board, such that everybody buys into the plan and understand what their role in the overall strategy is. The second step is the portfolio planning. This is where we actually make decisions about allocation of funds to the investments that we need to make driven by the strategy. We need to translate our goals into executionable initiatives that can be acted upon throughout the organization. We need to make sure that we have coherent plans for our business units and the portfolios that they all rely on in terms of achieving those goals. So the portfolio planning involves a lot of aspects, all the way down to resources and capacity. And in many cases, we fall short. We become overly optimistic with respect to overlaying new initiatives into existing portfolios without creating necessary capacity. The third element that many organizations overlook or maybe haven't been educated adequately in is what's called benefits realization management. So these are the methods that, again, straightforward methods. They're well understood, they're well documented, but many may not be perhaps educated in those areas, that concern themselves with identifying the benefits that outcomes are expected to achieve and understanding the dependencies between those. What is it that we need to do? What are the series of events that need to take place for certain outcomes to be achieved in order to get the value that we're expecting out of our initiatives? This boils down to understanding cross-functional dependencies, perhaps contractual dependencies, perhaps resource and capacity constraints that allow benefits to be enabled the way we're expecting. There are some techniques there that are very straightforward that I think once people see them and understand them, can help in many cases. The fourth one that I think organizations are getting increasingly better at, but many still overlook and perhaps is an afterthought for many, is organizational change management. The aspect of ensuring our organization is ready to adopt the outcomes that we're enabling and the outcomes that we're seeking. It might be a new system that we're deploying, it might be a process change, it might be some other transformational undertaking that we are launching. However, we need to make sure that the organization is ready to adopt and use those new features and those new services, applications that we're deploying. It is not until the time that the organization has fully adopted those new services that we are in fact in a position to achieve the benefits and realize the value that we're expecting. It is my experience that anything that goes wrong in any step prior to this point will result in a delay, at best in a delay in benefits realization. And if organizational change management is an afterthought or not planned properly, perhaps people haven't been trained early enough, we'll see at best, we'll see delays. In worst cases, we'll see that benefits won't be realized at all if adoption is not synchronized and orchestrated in line with the overall plans. The fifth element that I will talk about is the end-to-end life cycle governance, the governance of the entire framework that organizations rely on for strategy execution. It is important that we understand who's watching each step, who's all the process elements, and who is ensuring that the handoffs throughout this life cycle are in fact taking place in the optimal manner.
Fantastic, thank you very much for a very thorough overview there. And you mentioned also those key steps and I suppose the critical areas that are often overlooked within strategy execution. What methods then are needed to ensure that expected value is indeed realized?
So when you look at the back end of the life cycle that I just described, it is the benefits realization management techniques that we deploy that really will ensure that we understand how benefits will be realized. Typically, something that I've seen many times in my career is, again, we focus on the new, we focus on deploying a new process, or we focus on deploying a new system. And in some cases, we forget that it is not until we clean up behind us, until we cancel old contracts, until we retire old systems, until we disposition resources that perhaps are no longer used in terms of infrastructure. It is not until we do all the necessary cleanup that we will get all the benefits that were expected. And that is very often an afterthought. It is something that many perhaps could do a better job at. So that, in concert with the organizational change management, ensuring that resources are ready to adopt and ensuring that resources and stakeholders are on board to adopt the change that is undertaken, those are the two elements that really will enable and ensure that we achieve the benefits that we're expecting.
Fantastic, thank you. And so for the individuals attending the forum itself who have the benefit of being able to participate in your session, what do you ultimately want them to be able to take away from that and try and look to implement if they're experiencing great challenges in this space?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And in my experience, and when I've discussed this question with others in the past, it really depends on where they are at in their life cycle in terms of maturity, in terms of organizational readiness. Many organizations excel in multiple areas. Many organizations have maturity across the life cycle in some elements, but most organizations have weak spots. Most organizations that I've seen and worked with have areas that they could really improve. It might be in the upfront part, the way we translate our strategy and our strategic goals into actionable and properly planned portfolio initiatives in our project portfolio. And maybe the way they do that. In other organizations, it might be, as I said, benefits realization, where the gap is. So the feedback or the actionable items that people are going to take back from this will depend on where they're at in their own maturity. I have yet to speak with somebody who haven't had the desire to go back and make a couple of tweaks in some place or another. And I think there's something that everybody can do. We can always get better. And in fact, this entire life cycle already subjected to ongoing and continuous improvements. I have suggestions in each area for where to start. I have suggestions in each area for some of the steps that organizations might take in order to achieve a higher level of maturity. So it'll depend on the situation of the individual.
Very much so. Fantastic. Thank you. And I suppose then finally, outside of your role as a speaker at the forum coming up, what are you most looking forward to at the event itself?
Yeah, Jason, you know what? I really enjoy the opportunity at events like this to network with others and hear what folks work on in terms of the practices that they have success with. I have been in this realm for a while, and I think that I learn a lot from hearing what other folks work on and what it is that they would like to do to improve their own outcomes. There's always an opportunity to learn from other both speakers and attendees, and the networking and that in combination is what I'm looking to gain from myself personally.
Amazing. Well, we're really looking forward to having you there, and very excited for your session as well. So thank you very much for taking the time today to provide our community with some insight into that. As mentioned, Morten will be joining us at the Northeast IT and Security Leaders Forum taking place in Washington, D.C., serving the Northeast states. If you're interested in participating and you're not already registered, please feel free to check that out. In the meantime, thank you very much, Morten. I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.